Been a lurker for some time, but created an account specifically for this story. Settle in, best beloved, because this is going to take some time. I have a tendency to write the way I eat, which is to say far too much and in a way that isn't healthy for me. In fact, I'll give you the TLDR now in case you don't want to go through all of this. Ended up with a horrible roommate. When he screwed up, my other roommates and I helped get him arrested and then sued him successfully. Sherman set the Wayback Machine for the 1989/1990 school year. I was a fifth-year senior living off campus at a large Midwestern university. In my fourth year, I shared the bottom floor of a house with 3 other guys. 2 of them graduated, and one needed only to finish up a class or 2, so he decided to commute for his last semester. I wanted to stay in the same house, so I arranged to get 3 other roommates for my final year. Dramatis personae. Y. Chin, your humble narrator, a fifth-year senior who still didn't understand that the world is essentially made entirely of crap. Bob 1, a roommate with whom I worked at the campus library. An art student with a sarcasm problem. A bit of an ass, but not a terrible human being. Bob 2, another roommate, and friend of Bob 1. Yes, they had the same name. No, this is not their real name. Mama's boy, a third roommate who is important in this story only because of his departure. Chunk, the roommate who replaces Mama's boy about 6 weeks into the semester. He will be the focus of this tale. Tim the landlord. This is the only name I have not changed. This is not because Tim the landlord is guilty, but because he is a prince among people and needs to be celebrated. Tim was the sort of man who, when he sees evil, slaps it across the face with his vain manhood, and then drinks mead from the skulls of his enemies. Your children should wish to be half the human being that Tim was for this year. The house. As I say, we had the bottom floor of a house. There was a common bathroom, a kitchen, and a living room. Off the southeast corner of the living room was a single bedroom. Off the southwest corner was a second bedroom that connected, through a slightly smaller room, to the bathroom. The first year I lived in the house, one guy paid extra and got the southeast bedroom to himself. The other 2 guys and I shared the 2 connected rooms, with the guy who got his own room paying a little more in rent. This second year, I paid a little more rent and got my own room with the 2 Bobs and Mama's boy sharing the 2-room. Sweet. The first 6 weeks. School starts and everything seems fine. Unbeknownst to us, Mama's boy is not happy. Despite his being a college senior, this is the first time he has ever lived away from home, and it turns out that he's not a fan. He doesn't like having roommates, he doesn't like making his own meals, he doesn't like doing his own laundry. So, after 6 weeks of these living arrangements, he leaves and goes back home to Mom. The other 3 of us are now panicked. We can't each come up with the additional money to cover Mama's boy's quarter of the rent. Yes, it would have only been about $55 per month, but all of us were working minimum wage jobs. At that time, minimum wage was under $4 per hour, so that money was something close to a week's wages for a part-time job. So we go across the street, literally, to Tim the landlord's house and tell him of our woes. As I said, Tim was a man among boys and a man among men. He tells us that he will find us a 4th guy. This is a bigger problem than you may at first realize. With school already 6 weeks in, everybody already had housing, so no one is looking for a roommate, but Tim says he'll handle this for us. Further, proving just how great of a human being he is, Tim tells us that on the off chance that the guy he finds for us proves to be a complete waste of oxygen, he'll put the guy on a separate lease. We'll be responsible for our part of the rent, and the guy he finds for us will be responsible for his part. This way, we're not liable if the guy proves to be a flake. Enter Chunk. The guy Tim found for us was Chunk. Chunk was not a college student, but a local who was looking to move out of his house. He worked construction, mostly installing drywall, and made pretty good money doing it. Even more, while his boss kept him on the books, he was on not as a full-time worker, so most of his money came in under the table and untaxed. However, Chunk was not the smartest of human beings. Despite coming home every Friday with $400 to $600 cash, keep in mind, those are $1,989, so something closer to $1,000 per week, he would regularly have to return to a store on Thursday night to return a purchase so that he had enough money to buy himself dinner. I have no idea where his money went. We assumed he would go to crowded college bars and buy rounds of drinks for everyone. The money wasn't going to drugs, although now that I think about it, it could have been fueling a steroid habit. However, since he was on his own lease, as long as he covered his share of things like gas, electric, and phone, we were all good. Life with Chunk. Chunk was a terrible roommate. Big, stupid, loud, and just about everything else you could think of. He left dirty dishes everywhere and refused to wash them. It got to the point where I bought my own cookware and dishes and kept them in my room. He would eat other people's food and replace it with cheap, substandard versions. Oh, you bought yourself a package of Oreos? He'd eat them and replace them with a smaller package of generic, off-brand sandwich cookies. He'd use other people's towels after he took a shower, and if you didn't like that, he'd tell you that the best way to handle the dispute was to go out front and fight about it. After all, if he could beat the shit out of you, and he could, he must be right. He bought himself pay-per-view movies and, since we all lived there, thought we should all pay for them even though we didn't watch them. Still, he was a necessary evil. We didn't plot revenge against him, but eventually, revenge fell into our laps. To give you an idea of just how dumb Chunk really was, though, here's the prime example. Chunk lost his job. Because his boss kept him on the books a little, he managed to get unemployment. However, since he had lost his income, he panicked regarding his rent. He went to talk to Tim the landlord, who agreed to let Chunk work for him through the winter shoveling his various properties and doing other menial tasks in exchange for his rent. As I say, best beloved, Tim was the sort of man we should all aspire to be. So, after claiming poverty to Tim, Chunk goes out and buys himself a motorcycle, then asks Tim if there's anywhere safe he can park it. His new motorcycle that he'd purchased after claiming he couldn't pay his rent. The incident. One fine spring day, Chunk is out gallivanting on his motorcycle when he does something stupid like blow through a stop sign. He is naturally pulled over by a cop who has seen this action, and when the cop walks up to discuss his behavior with him, Chunk decided the best course of action was to drive away as quickly as he could. We're going to have to keep score here, best beloved. We've got a traffic incident and leaving the scene to start with, so our count of problems Chunk has caused for himself is at 2. As it happens, Chunk drove off because 3, he didn't have insurance, or 4, a license because he'd had it suspended. Why? Because he 5, blew off his court date for his earlier arrest on a 6, DUI. Chunk is suddenly a wanted fugitive. He is public enemy number 1 in our little college farm town. Evidently, he drove home and hid in our basement for a couple of hours before realizing that eventually the police would get his address and come looking. He left and vanished into the wind. I knew none of this at the time, as I was working the circulation desk of the college library. I got home just after midnight, said hello to the 2 Bobs, and walked into my bedroom. Lo! And behold, Bob 1's girlfriend is sitting on my bed. I turn, look at the Bobs, and say, "Okay, explain." Bob 1 says, "Well, I had her go into your room so that she wasn't involved when the cops showed up." I nod and say, "Okay, explain." The Bobs do, and I learn of all of the events of Chunk and his desperate flight from the law. Just as the explanation has finished, the police show up again and question us. Now, we had endured about 7 months of living with this idiot, and the 3 of us hated him about as much as 3 college-aged guys can hate another human being. And it's worth noting that the 2 Bobs had to share rooms with this human trash fire, so they got it worse than I did and hated him more than I did. We assured the police that if we knew anything, they'd be the first to know it. We wanted this asshole out of our lives, and if the police could bring that about, so much the better. The Revenge, Part 1. The next day, we went across the street to talk to Tim the landlord. Tim's response was as pragmatic as it was epic. "He hasn't paid me in months, and he hasn't done any work for me in months," was Tim's reply. "Why don't you guys evict him?" And so we did. We gathered up all of Chunk's stuff and put it in the shed behind the house. All of his clothing, his weight bench, and even his food. Everything, with a single exception, we'll get to that, was moved to the shed. We printed up a series of eviction notices and posted them around the house. Front door, back door, interior door, windows. Pretty much every possible point of access into our part of the house had a notice for Chunk telling him that he'd been booted by Tim the landlord, that his stuff was in the shed, and that he owed us for supporting his out-of-work ass for things like gas, electric, and phone for the previous several months. Been a slice, bro. Don't let the door hit you and don't bend over for the soap. That evening, Bob too has just finished calling into work, saying that he couldn't come in because he was, fake cough, sick. He puts the phone down, and it rings immediately. It's Chunk. He's called to tell us that he has to leave town for a couple of weeks. Can we put some of his stuff together for him? Why yes, we say. Your ass has been evicted, my friend. Your stuff is conveniently already together for you in the shed out back. Chunk is outraged that the rules actually apply to him, and that he can be evicted for something as trivial as not paying rent for 3 months. He slams down the phone. Roughly an hour later, there is noise outside the house. The eviction notices are being pulled down. The prodigal son has returned, and has brought some of his stare junkie friends with him to help gather his belongings. We lift the phone receiver. We dial the phone. Hello, Farmtown Police? Are you still looking for the dangerous outlaw Chunk? Well, we are his roommates, and he is here collecting his belongings after being evicted. You might want to send some patrol cars round to this address to collect him. We wait. Minutes later, 2 squad cars roll up, sirens off, but lights on. One blocks the driveway. The other stands ready by the field to the east of the house. Cops exit the cars and flank the house, guns drawn. I tell you, best beloved, it was like an episode of Cops, except that we could not change the channel. We run to the kitchen where the windows overlook the shed. Cops arrive. Chunk is busted. Chunk offers a lame excuse. Cops are not having it. Chunk is cuffed, dragged to a squad car and driven away. Moments later, basking in the milky afterglow, one of the Bobs realized that while we put almost everything of Chunk's in the shed, we neglected to give him his beer. We celebrate Chunk's arrest by drinking his beer. The Revenge, Part 2. Several weeks later, Bob too and I graduate. That morning, we decide that our best course of action is to sue Chunk for the money he owes us. We do. Small claims court a few weeks later. Chunk again fails to show up. Decision for the plaintiffs to the tune of about $650. I never saw a dime of that money, but I slept better knowing that if Chunk ever tried to get a loan for as much as a pack of gum, he had that unpaid settlement on his record. And that, best beloved, is the story of how 2 of my roommates and I got our other roommate arrested and out of our lives.